Hi, I'm Bill from CJ Pony Parts. The MT82 6-speed manual transmission used in modern Mustangs always gets a bad rap, but it's always been my opinion that with the proper supporting hardware, it can do a pretty good job. If you're looking to bang gears in an MT82, one thing you need to do is definitely shorten the throws. So today we're going to show you how to install Steeda's short throw shift lever using my 2015 Mustang GT. The Steeda approach is a little bit different. It uses the factory forward shifter base and just replaces it with a much shorter throw handle. I'm actually a fan of this setup because it'll allow me to use the blowfish bracket, which I've had success with in other cars. Another nice thing with the Steeda lever, by being a stock replacement, it's going to use the stock knob and retain the factory style reverse lockout. For this installation, let a lift or a jack and jack stands, locking pliers, C-clamp, random small socket, 3/8 ratchet, 10mm socket, at least a 12-inch extension, swivel, T20 Torx bit, small pick, and a 5/64 Allen key. We're going to begin the installation of the Steeda shift lever inside the vehicle by removing the shift knob and then separating the boot and the reverse lockout. To get the boot off, basically what you want to do is get underneath it and then sort of lift up carefully on the clips. To get the boot off and separate the reverse lockout, there's 3 clips, one here, one over here, and one here. Use a small pick, just disengage them while pulling up. Once that's off, be careful, remove this ring. You will want to keep this, put it aside for reinstallation. The next step is going to be a little bit tricky. You have to remove this pin located right here so we can separate everything else. What I'll do first is push the spring out of the way, use some sort of a lock door clamping pliers, keep the spring out of our way. What I'm going to do is use a C-clamp to press it through. They actually include a small dowel in the kit that'll make this easier. What you want to do is put a socket on one side, use a C-clamp to press it through. These are very inexpensive. You can get one at a local hardware store for usually around $1. And once we have it flat, you can use the included dowel, put that in there, and that allows us to get it all the way pushed through. The pin will come right out the other side, and the dowel you just pushed in is small enough to push it through with your pick. Now we can remove our clamp and our spring. The last step to getting this plastic retainer off, push down on this boot to separate it. And on the driver's side here is one small little Torx screw you have to remove. Okay, now we can move under the car. Now we're underneath the car. We removed our drive shaft and our exhaust. You do not have to do this for the installation. The reason we did it is so you can actually see what we're doing, because with the drive shaft in the way, all you see is my hands up there working. You won't be able to understand what the actual process is. The first step is to remove this rubber seal right here. Slide the rubber seal, just simply lift up, take it off the front edge of the transmission, then move back and remove these 2 nuts holding the bracket to the floor. To access the factory shift lever, the next step is going to remove these 4 10mm bolts right here. Then you want to carefully separate the 2, make sure not to damage the original gasket. Now we can carefully remove the linkage. Put that aside, making sure you don't lose either of these bushings. And the last step to getting the factory shifter out is remove these two 10mm bolts right up inside. The plate and then pull down and remove the factory shift arm. Before we put the stock shift lever aside, you want to remove these two plastic cups. Simply pry them off pretty easily with your fingers. We're going to move them over to the new shift lever. It should have enough lithium grease on them, but you can add more if you need to. That's ready to install in the car. Before we put the Steeda shift lever in the car, you want to make sure this hole here in the middle of the body is facing the driver's side. This is the hole where the screw goes and the holds reverse lockout. If this is facing the passenger side of the car, it actually won't go back together properly. This has to face the driver's side. Now I'll put the Steeda up into place. Reinstall the bracket. And now we can reinstall the linkage. Make sure the black cup ends up inside of this. Two bushings line up in the openings. Now we can reinstall the cover, make sure the gasket is lined up. Now we're going to reinstall this linkage seal on the front. Reinstall the bushing on the back of the trans and put it up on this place. Once those are tight, we can move back to the interior of the car. Now we're going to move back up into the car. We're going to start with a plastic reverse lockout. Put that over and reinstall the screw we removed earlier. Once that moves freely, pull the rubber gasket back up over it. And now we're ready to install the spring. So again, we're going to push the spring down and clamp it out of the way. Instead of a pin, Steeda provides two tiny little set screws. You're going to put them in from either side until they touch in the middle, leaving the same distance out on either side. They're snug, you can release the spring. Make sure they're holding it down like they're supposed to. I'll place the small white spacer over the top and let you slide down to the screws. Then reinstall our shift boot, making sure it locks into place into this ring. Make sure all three are locked in. Double check your reverse lockout, then reinstall the boot. Now our last step to reinstall our shift knob. and our installation is finished. The Steeda worked exactly as advertised. The throws are noticeably shorter. Even though we only changed the lever, there's a noticeable difference. I'd say 20 to 30% probably shorter throws when you're driving the car. Teamed up with something like a blowfish bracket, this is an excellent choice for your S550 Mustang. The installation will take you between 2 to 3 hours to be back on the road in no time.